to have you on the podcast today. This is going to be an amazing conversation, and I just want to the audience to know who you are. We met at an event where I just saw you speaking, and I was automatically fascinated and chased you down.
Mm.
That was about 2 years ago. I said, "I gotta know this guy." And you know what was so exciting that made me chase you down is you said, "Well, I've got a $50,000 consulting for equity check coming in right now, and I just got it." And you kind of stood up and you showed your phone and you said, "Okay, I just got this check." And, it was really fascinating, and I said, "He's the type of guy that I need to learn more about. What is he doing?" And, that's how it all started.
Well, you are absolutely gorgeous, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. It wasn't a $50,000 check. It was 500,000. I was standing up very excited saying, look, look, look. It was just, I mean, the timing couldn't have been better. And it was, and what I was showing was like, it was the bank account. So there was no disputing it, but it was, and that was the beginning of it. But thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Absolutely.
How can I help?
Well, as I've gotten to know you a little bit better, your story is so fascinating, and that's why I wanted to have you on Change and Triumph. I know your focus is helping businesses, but before we get into how you've pivoted into helping businesses, what did you go to college for? What did you start out doing?
Oh my God. At university, I was, an engineering, electronic and electrical engineering guy. So I got a degree in that thinking, yeah, that would be marvelous. And it is, it's a great career to be in. But it just wasn't making I couldn't make enough money in that profession to get a deposit to buy a house. And I saw all these really cool young salespeople coming in Porsche 911s selling me stuff, thinking, have I just gone, how am I over here earning nothing and they're over there learning loads of money? So I pivoted into sales where I spent most of my career in tech. And I got involved in a lot of mergers and acquisitions, but from the inside of a corporate. So at VP, CEO level kind of stuff. You would be looking for businesses that you might sell, or you would be looking for businesses that you would acquire to grow the value of the proposition that you have, right? A couple of things that I kind of quite sort of chuffed about, but in the overall scheme of things, these are sort of, well, 0 to 950 million in value in 18 months without budgets, without much by way of marketing or people from London into Asia. It's kind of a tough nut. And then taking another business from 140 million in value to over a billion in value in 3 years. Now, when I was doing that, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I would argue that today, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of
Wow.
learning every day like everyone else. When and there's been other things as well. There's been several disposals of in the 25 to $120 million range along the way. But those two bigger ones were kind of ones I remember because they were hard. And all of these though, the common thread across all of them, you had to get really deep and focused on two or three key things and execute on them flawlessly. And you started out execute. Imagine a river that's moving from where it is to the ocean. By the time it gets there, it's kind of meandering all over the place, but it's a tight little stream to start with. And so that in reverse is we were all over the place in the beginning of the journey on these companies. A lot of them were turnarounds and they weren't doing well, but they had to be resurrected. And then, it was laser focused by the end of it, but you just improved as you went. And so it taught me the mantra, if you like, of don't try and build a perfect plan, get going and pivot and learn. Because whatever plan I've ever built, as I get to market, I find I didn't think of that, or I didn't know this, or what about that, or this changed. Think about AI and how it's impacting everybody's lives right now. And I
Right,
wouldn't call that an S curve. I'd call it a vertical cliff, at
right.
the moment at the pace of change. So you've got to adapt and on the fly and move forward. So I kind of started doing a lot of that.
Sounds like you've had many pivots just in that you went from sales, you went from, "I'm an engineer," to
Yeah.
tech sales, and somehow you ended up in M&A. And you what year did you end up in M&A?
Yeah, so let me come back to that. I just want to take a step back. I don't think so much in terms of the pivots. What's really happened is I've acquired more skills.
Awesome.
And so I've always been at the commercial end of business. I've always been at the value end of business. I've always been at the where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? But what I didn't have was any skills when I first started.
Right.
And then what I've acquired along the way is more skills. And I think if I try and encourage people to think in those terms as much as possible, because if you then think about it that way, the trouble for so many people that are slightly older, and one of the things I'm beginning to see right now with the onset of AI is so many people are fearful of their future and their ability to earn money because they're going to be put out on the market. They won't have a job because AI is going to take over. Now, that will be true for the positions of many that they currently have. But if you can think in terms of acquiring skills, you tend to make yourself a more valuable version today of the person that you were yesterday. And that gives longevity, right? For many people when they've got grey hairs and they're getting further down their career line.
Of course.
And that becomes very, very relevant because too many young businesses don't benefit from the mentors that have been on that journey before them successfully and unsuccessfully, that have got the grey hairs and the battle scars to show for it, because those guys are really valuable down here to these guys coming through. So I kind of think of it in terms of pivot. So to answer your question, which was how long have I been in M&A? I was in M&A in the corporate world and from an operational point of view, 2005. But for a long period of that time, I didn't even know because I was growing from the inside, making recommendations, doing a lot of the due diligence, growing the business, and being part of the process of selling. It was only when I kind of purposely, I was doing a big transaction with Thomson Reuters and wanted to be on the other side of it. And I wasn't really getting anywhere with it. And so I made the decision to go and get educated on it. And that was a huge move. So that kind of took in the skills that allowed me to become an expert of the inside, growing businesses, obviously sales, marketing, ops, and development because they're a tech organization, and then move on the outside to how do you package and bring those things together. And what Thomson Reuters used to do a lot of was internal roll-ups. They'd go make an acquisition on one business, and then they buy a lot of other businesses and put them around it, and then that group would be much more valuable. They'd go through and systemize and operationalize all of them into the same system, which wasn't an easy thing to do for some of them, but that's what they would do. And then they would sell it on to a large PE or a large institution 4 or 5 years later. And that was my education that I didn't even realize was my education. I was working with some of the smartest, most ruthless people in the world who were absolutely brilliant at what they did. And I'm in the kitchen learning with them, though I didn't realize I was in the kitchen learning with them. Because only when I got a formal education outside, and anybody thinking about M&A, one of the guys that I really, really think is great is Carl Allen. There's a guy called Carl Allen. Anybody that doesn't know him, that's interested, go and check him out. And that just put all the framework and the knowledge to everything I'd been doing. And I thought, that's what it is. So I continued on with that. And so what I do around if you fast forward that now, all those pivots, it kind of led up to the pandemic in 2020.
Yes.
And around that time, I was at a point in my career where I was making great money, thought I was bulletproof. And then I got the original strain of COVID, like so many other people.
My goodness.
But in that moment, unfortunately, actually, we got into lockdown in the February, March of that year.
Yes.
So I went through that year like
This
everyone
is
else in
in
lockdown
London,
around the
right?
world.
This is in London, correct?
Yeah, I was in London. Yeah. So I'm CEO of a business called Acquisitions for You, which is an American business. So I
Okay.
hop backwards and forwards these days. But back at that time, my hopping stopped because we all got in lockdown and my family are here. And so we spent that year watching the league tables tonight. You and I, how many deaths by which country, how many new
My
infections
goodness.
by which country. And our kids were seeing all of that because they were in lockdown as
So
well.
horrible. So horrible.
It's just,
I was just thinking about you as a male at the top of your career and how that made you, how you related to your family. How did you relate to your family with
well, it
the
kind of,
high level M&A before COVID even happened?
yeah, you think I think for me, and I can't speak for other people, unfortunately, I was in this narrow lane and in this bubble, and I thought that was the world. I was completely oblivious to everything that goes on in the world. And there was just one small thing that happened one day that made me attend one event and read one book. And within a year, I'd blew my mind. I'd read 100 books. And so I thought, oh my God, what have I been doing? But the real pivot happened out of um, a stressful moment, which was coming towards the end of 2020. We were starting to come out of the pandemic a bit. We didn't get the vaccines yet, but we were allowed in little groups of 3 or 4.
Yes. Let me just set the stage here. You're still in your corporate career at one of the large firms.
No, no, no. So,
Okay.
by that time, I'd
You're
been
now
running my own
acquisitions
firm
for
as
you.
but by that time, I was, running an M&A firm, and so I'd come out of corporate I came out of corporate in 2013. So I've
Okay.
been 7 years out. Well, I came out of corporate in that capacity. Actually, I was consulting to corporates,
Mm.
but in terms of the M&A stuff, I came out that, around the 2013. Roll forward to 2020, the big change moment was being diagnosed at the end of 2020 with stage 4 cancer. Just to make that even worse, given 6 months to live.
Lord.
What then happened was, once you deal with that diagnosis, it changes everything, because you start thinking, have I done enough? And although I looked at it and thought, we've probably got enough for 7 or 8 years with me not here for the family. What are we going to do? And then I started to realize, shit, I hadn't done enough at all. But I thought I was bulletproof and that I was going to live forever.
Let's
And
back up.
so
You obviously were able to buy the house.
uh, the house was the
You
house
were
was
able
already
to
bought.
buy the house since university.
No, not because of the diagnosis. That in terms of anything
No,
else.
I mean, you said at the very beginning that you couldn't afford a house, coming out of university.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Then you went
yeah,
into sales, and so I'm just,
yeah.
not
No,
side piece. You were able to buy a house, get married to a beautiful woman. You've got a son now.
we
This is where you are in 2020.
Yeah. So asset wise, okay, but cash flow wise, I just felt I'd cocked up on a number of things I hadn't done enough. And then to top it all, going into January 2021, my path was that we're going to take the cancer out, which they did, and maybe that would give me a few more months. There was no other expectation than that. So the cancer came out, and I got the original strain of COVID. This has been pre-vaccine, so vaccine started to come in around February, March of that year, 2021. And it was obviously key workers that got them first. So I was early. So we had to get through that. And it was at a point when nobody knew what was going to go on. It was like a 28-day window of left or right. And it was a difficult time for most people. So I've got the original strain of COVID and I've got cancer. But it turns out that they think the COVID was what cured me of the cancer, because I'm now 5 years further down, 6 years down the line now, from 2020 to the beginning of
Wow.
2026. And so I'm out of that remission phase.
Congratulations, Mark. And
Thank you. Yeah.
you can't just scapegoat over that like, "Oh, yeah, I had stage 4."
Well,
Goodness. Now, there
it's
was
a
something you told me, though, that I really want our listeners to know about you, and there was something that your son said to you that made you.
yeah. So in that moment of going through the cancer, there was a 10-day window when I've got COVID and I'm recovering for cancer, and my temperature was through the roof, and my it wasn't good. But every morning, my son, who was Thomas, who was then age 10, would come in at when he woke up at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, because he was on lockdown too. For him, it was a holiday. They did most of that year playing Xbox. So 7, 10, lunchtime, afternoon tea, because we do afternoon tea in the UK, of course. And then at tea time, he'd come in and just chat from the door. So just to give listeners a view in their minds of our bedroom, not that I want everybody in our bedroom, of course, but you've got a big TV on the wall, black. The bed is black. Everything else in the room is white. And out to the right, there's beautiful views over rolling hills, which is a view from our bedroom that we're privileged to have. And to the left, over in the corner, there's a door coming into the bedroom. And just to the left of that, there's a dressing area that leads through to an ensuite. And then there's me in this little bed. And he opens the door and he can't come in because you've got to be distanced, and he'd just check on dad. But we would catch up on what he was doing. He'd ask how I was, but we'd use that to try and get him. He was trying to teach me how to be better at Xbox so we could game when I got better, right? And so I'm not very good at Xbox, and he was very patient. And so, but on the Thursday of that week, he came in, and I was on the phone to a friend of mine in LA who happens to be very well connected to a personal friend of hers who's a senior staff nurse at the LA General Hospital. And when she called me, I picked up the phone, and Tommy was in the room. And as soon as I started speaking, she said, "Oh, you sound terrible." I said, "Yeah, I'm not feeling great. I've just come out of surgery and I've got COVID." She said, "Why are you talking to me?" I said, "Well, I thought you needed something, because when you run your own business, I kind of felt that I should pick up the phone if it was important enough for her to call, because she didn't call that often." So she said, "Oh my God, don't talk to me. You need to read this thing I'm going to send you." And so she sent me a kind of two-page thing that her staff nurse friend in LA had sent to all of her staff. And what you do with COVID patients, which is you sit them up, you don't let them lie down because that clears the lungs. You get them to take exercise and you get them to exhale to clear all that stuff out of their lungs, and a couple of other things. But
Mhm.
she'd sent me that after we'd had a bit of a conversation there about a particular company that we were trying to acquire at the time. And like 9 out of 10 companies in a particular revenue range, they never really realize their true potential, and they end up staying on the market. So all those owners, which is a lot of the reason why you see a lot of these business owners in their 70s and 80s still working in the business, because they can't get the money they need, and they still got bills to pay. And so Tommy switched tacks. Instead of asking me about Xbox, he was asking me about the call. So I said, "Oh, it was Angela, and she's going to send me this thing, and we were talking about this deal." And he was politely asking more about the deal. So I kind of said, on the M&A side of it, when you're looking to buy businesses, sometimes it doesn't work out. In fact, it doesn't work out 9 out of 10 times.
Wow.
And so he immediately, so he, that meant 9 out of 10 times we didn't get to buy them. His immediate thing was, so if you don't get to buy them 9 out of 10 times, what happens to them? I said, well, they just sit there. He said, you need to help them. And to which I said, well, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that, given that we couldn't find a transaction that was going to work. And his answer to me was, his question to me followed up, because I'm thinking that, not saying it, but I'm saying to him, I'm giving some thought, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. To which he said, well, you need to, because what happens to their mums and dads if they get COVID and they die?
Wow.
Who's going to look after their families? You've got to remember news reports all the time, like every news
Right.
report all day, every day was just
Every
about that.
minute. Who
And a 10-year-old seeing it as well. And I had no answer for that. And I went, and I eventually said, yeah, let me think about it. But 10-year-olds don't forget. So roll forward. I wasn't thinking about it because I wanted to get clear of the cancer first, because I didn't, at that point, I wasn't going
or
to be here for longer than 6 months. So when I go back in April to see my consultant, which is 3 months later or 9 weeks later, he said to me, the good news and the bad news is what he had for me. And I said, well, let's start with the good news. He said, well, the good news is we can't find any sign of the cancer
wow.
at all.
Wow.
To which I went, okay, that's obviously fabulous. So I'm wondering what the bad news is. So I said, I have the bad news. And to which Mark, because he's called Mark as well, said to me, we haven't got a clue as to why. No idea whatsoever. To which I said, well, that's whose bad news is that? And he said, well, it's not bad news for you. It's just
What's it?
professionally he wanted to know. But it turns out that when I pressed him, that what was happening was there were about 7 or 8 cases around the world in medical journals being reported
Hmm.
of people like me that were very late stage cancer, had been given a terminal diagnosis, weren't expected to live. Some of those people were taking treatment. I wasn't on any treatment, never had any chemo or anything throughout my
Never
cancer
had any
journey.
treatment.
No, because they found it really late, and it wasn't moved to chemo; it was get it out. That was and that was just to save
And
them all
COVID
time.
time, so they didn't have time to concentrate on that.
Well, I was lucky in as much as I was private, so I had access to facilities that no one else really had unless they were private, and that was a real game changer too. But he said what we think is that somehow COVID may have had an impact, and could be the reason why. So I'm immediately thinking cure. How do we bottle this and get it out to everybody so that nobody suffers from it? But it doesn't work like that, and nobody actually knew. So even now, there is more thinking on this to confirm what they thought at the time, because what they think is COVID drives the immune system, or can, for some people, drive the immune system into overdrive, which then means that if you're in basically decent shape, and I was, and I still am,
Yeah.
then your body's got everything it needs to fight. And one of the best things to help us overcome any ailments and things like that, and some forms of cancer as well, is your immune system. So they think that mine went into overdrive and cleared the rest of it, the secondaries out. It doesn't seem that it's good at primaries. Now, I'm not a medical professional and I can't prove that. And I'm not exactly willing to go back and say, stick the cancer in and give me the original strain. Let's go run that one again.
Right.
But I kind of feel that I'm privileged and I've got a second chance. So then I've got a 10-year-old reminding me of the promise I made, which is I'd
Oh,
have a look, right? So that led to me writing a book called The Secrets to 10x in Your Business and Cashing Out Tax Free, which took me 2 years to pull together because I'd never written a book. And eventually I just wrote the book myself and was self published.
sidebar before you leave, what a miracle that is, you beat cancer, stage 4 cancer. Did you do anything in the realm of, because you mentioned some private facility, did you do anything in the realm of gene-targeted therapy?
No, so it was all accidental when, tonight, because
Okay.
what I was doing was probably, and I still do it now. I'm also one of those people that went to being from very heavy to not so heavies. We measure it in stones in the UK. So I was 21 stones. It's 14. 21 stone is 14 pounds. Is about 140 to 100, somewhere in the 140, 150 kilo range. It's heavy, right? So now I'm under 100 kilos. So
Wonderful.
I'm sort of 95. So that's 21 stone to 15. That's a big chunk of weight to lose.
Right.
But I did that through diet and exercise. So by the time COVID hit me, I was in a good place diet wise. And I also do an awful lot of vitamin support, mineral support to boost anything I might be lacking in. And I've been doing that for a long period of time
Mhm.
before I got hit with the cancer and the COVID. That's what I was doing. And doing that is what they think might have helped me. Now, they're not saying it's the case and this is not a cure. But
Right.
if your body's got everything it needs, if it can fight, it probably will. And
Right.
is the thinking. No proof on this, but I believe it because I'm here and I'm still in great shape and there's been no reoccurrence of the cancer or anything else. I'm just very, very, very lucky. But there was no, they might call what I was doing by accident some kind of form of immunology now. I've heard that comparison.
Mhm.
But it's not targeted gene therapy or anything like that. But because
Right.
at the time it was, would I get a few more months? That was where we were at the time. So then rolling that forward, I then had a promise to keep and I didn't know how was I going to do that? And so I thought I'd do the book. And so I got self published on the book. Then I realized that when people bought books, most of them don't open the covers, they just put it on the shelf. So I thought, well, how can, and the idea behind the book was to put something in the hands of business owners throughout the world that would help them do more to get their businesses to a point where they would absolutely be sellable for the money they needed. That was the key
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
And so that's become a bestseller. In fact, behind me, you can see it up on the
That's
billboard at
wonderful.
Times Square. So that took some time, and
And
I'm blessed and
excellent
privileged.
business.
Yeah, I'm cashing out tax free. I had a lot of challenges
Fantastic.
with that because the moment you say tax free, you get in a lot of trouble with some people. And I got banned by Stripe, and Amazon banned me. And then when I was going through it with Amazon, they kind of changed their mind, but they never said that this was why they changed their minds. I just concluded it because Stripe were pretty forthright. And it's not, and so, but the journey became more than that. It became, so how do you, and then a movement of people that were also interested in helping other people sort of get more from their business when they get to the point of potentially selling it began. There's 25 of us in the group now in this sort of
Okay.
growing movement.
Okay.
And I was on stage talking one day and somebody came to me and said they want to help and they introduced me to a family office. So we had a 45-minute conversation. We weren't looking to raise cash. We were just talking about the challenge, what we're trying to do and my backstory to it. And it turned out that they'd also had some similar experiences. And I knew it because you ask certain kind of questions when you don't know. And
Of
when you're
course.
talking about somebody that does, they ask different questions and you know that they know immediately. So we came off of that. Um, and they just said, we want to help and we're going to support this. And then they brought another family office to the table. So between the two of them, that created 22 billion of funding for us specifically for this thesis, is what they call it, specifically for this.
Wonderful.
So we've gone forward with that, and then in Q4 we did another raise in alternative funding.
Q4 of 21?
No, 25. So
25.
Q4 of last year.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we now have
So
another
you met
500.
family offices at Q1 25.
Yeah, so we met with the family offices in Q4 of 24, and they became and they started to get behind us in Q1 of 25. By the end of 25, we've got another 350, 500 million of funding, which is a different kind of funding. The thing about family offices is they love the proposition, but they're very, very slow to deploy. And where we are with what we're doing, we need to deploy much more quickly. There's a particular name or slice of this part of M&A that probably won't be of any interest to your readers at all. But there's never been any funding for this kind of thing. So what we're doing is we're doubling the value of a business without an owner having to give up any of their own equity or borrow any money and fund any debt.
So your core promise is doubling business value in 6
Yeah,
months.
or
Now,
less.
and what
And
are
so
the 2 or 3 levers that most often create that
it's
that
it's one
step?
le- it's one lever.
One
So
lever.
now that we're blessed to have funding and or funding support, it means that we can go and build a business or group of businesses. That's the key thing that we can do. You see, so many entrepreneurs can't do that in certain sizes of companies. If you're Microsoft, you can.
Right.
Elon Musk, you can, but not many of us are in that category. So what happens is owners might get stuck. And this is golden for so many because we'll use our capital and take the risk and bring that to the table to build a bigger group. on the basis that we're then going to sell that group to the right buyers.
Okay.
And so that means that we can move at speed, and what we're bringing to the table is the value of cash, but we've got to get the right companies to bring into a group to use that cash, and then it's going to be sold. And where we're not a charity, we're a business. And so we don't dilute the owners, whereas they would have been massively diluted. So what I mean by that, if you could put in venture capital or private equity and you were worth 500,000, you're probably going to give up 50% of that or more to get that private equity money in. So if you're worth 500,000, you then become worth 2.5 million.
Right.
So effectively, you've got to grow that thing to double the size it was before you started in order that you double from where you were. What do I mean by that? So if you're worth 5 million and you take private equity or venture capital at 50% dilution, you're going to end up with 2.5 million. So
Right.
if you double the business back to where it was, you're only going to be back at where you started.
Of
So in
course.
order for you to get anything out of that, you've got to double it again. So we don't give owners that challenge. They don't have to do any of that, but we're still going to double it. So they go from a 50% dilution to a double. So they get not the 2.5, but the 10. So because we're
Wonderful.
double from 5 to 10. And then on top of that, if we've got the time and that they can allow us a bit more time, we can often structure that so that they can keep more of it. So what I mean by that is when you sell a business, you're going to give up between 30 and 50% of the sale price of the business most of the time to all the people that need to be paid fees. That includes the tax as well. So in most cases, if we've got a bit more time, we can often organize that in such a way that that 30 to 50% will probably come down to less than 10%, and in some instances might only come down to 3 or 4%. So there will always be some fees. One of the biggest chunks of it could be tax. And so we often won't get the tax to zero, although it is possible to do that, but we'll get it down massively. So if you're going to be worth 5 and you do nothing and you're in California, you end up with about 2.5 to 3 by the time you've paid all those fees and taxes. So we can double you to 10 and you can keep most of it, let's say 90% of it. All of a sudden, you've gone from a net 3 to a net 9.
That's
And
amazing.
that's without you having to sell any more product, without you having to take any equity dilution, without you having to borrow any money and service any debt, because we're bringing the capital to make that happen. So we're basically taking what would be a 7-year journey for you to go and build your own group
Of
using your
course.
own money. Because we're using our cash, we can do it in 2.
And so just for clarity, what you are using your cash for is to grow through acquisition as a service, right?
So what we're using the cash for is to build a bigger group, which could be some organic growth.
Okay.
It could be acquisitive growth. It could be some operational improvements. There are 5 parts to that pillar. It's a system that we call the double and keep it framework that's unique. No one else does this. And there's no one else that has the capital to deploy this in the way that we do. But the story doesn't stop there. So this part you know really well. So imagine that you've been able to come out of the business keeping, let's say, 9 of the 10. In fact, because Mark's maths isn't very good, let's just call it 10 for now, but it's not going to be quite 10, right? So if you took that 10 and you redeployed that lump sum that you've got now into the right investments, you could probably net 7 to 9% on those investments without having to pay any tax. And you'll certainly see those investments probably double in value every 7 years. Now, there's a lot of ways that you could do that. One of the ways that you could do that is to park some of that money with your organization, Tené, because you do an awful lot to help people on the property side. But it's not the only way. You might have a mixed portfolio where you do some property, because there's a lot of things that can help you grow that investment there, tax free.
Yeah.
Or you can grow it by putting it into other vehicles, maybe some insurance policies. And these are just 2. But
Right.
the idea of that is that you grow that passive wealth so that you're pulling an income tax minimized or tax free, and it will double every 7 years. So
Wow.
now you've gone from, if you're not working with us, 5 million is 2.5. Or if 5 million becomes 10, you've got so much more money to put in the pot that can be then doubled over a 7-year period. And by the way, you've now completed a journey that every entrepreneur hopes to complete, but so few are aware. When you sit above it and look down on it, very, very few people are aware of the journey that start to finish and what you can do. Because there's another piece that comes on this, which is you've got this passive income, you've done a double and keep. Now you're popping out the other end. And so many of the owners that I work with, I say to them, take a year off and go and do everything that's in your system that you promised yourself you'd ever do. Spend the time with the grandchildren, play golf every day, do the cruises, because you're going to get bored.
Right.
Because most of them have this inquisitive mind, and they're just not going to be satisfied with sitting around doing nothing.
Of course.
Most of them, not all of them. So now we're bringing them back to help other people do the same thing to earn two, three, 400, or maybe 500,000 a year in fees, consulting fees, advisory fees, and taking a small chunk of those businesses for helping them through successfully to exit and making that money all over again. And so they continue to compound the growth.
And you know,
That's what the double and keep it framework is about.
I
That's what we
love
help people do.
double and keep it. I love that. What you've done is it's kind of a segue to what we talk about in the buy what I talk about in the buy income strategy. And we have a specific workbook for business owners where, you've got all of this money now, you've exited a company and now you have to put it somewhere. And
Yeah.
you talked a lot about some of the 27 ways that we talk about, which is life insurance, and you talked about taxes, and you just talked
Yeah.
about a lot of things that, we cover in the buy income strategy.
In your group where you cover that, and so in my business, we're dealing with this issue all around the world.
Yes.
And so in your business where you're helping people there, it's predominantly people in North America that can take advantage of many of the wonderful things that you can provide for the Americans. But I've got
Right.
people leaving the States,
Yeah,
and I've got people in Germany, and I've got people in the UK that are going to
absolutely.
find it difficult to take advantage of some of the things. But the
You're
principles are,
right. You're right. Some of the things you're absolutely right. However, the 27 different ideas. They're just ideas of what you could do to take your earned income and deploy it into things. And you've covered some of those things, like how you said you've raised capital and you have
yeah,
all this capital that a family office has been able to invest in what you're doing. That's one of the ways we talk a lot about putting money into private equity, very similar to the Holy Grail of investing, where Tony Robbins talks about, in the average person, let's say an exiting business owner, putting money into private equity on the GP side or even on the LP side. So, what's next in order to be able to, mitigate taxes and all of that? Now, you emphasize growth without risk, and
yeah,
messaging is around no to low dilution, as you've been saying.
yeah.
What funding structures do you typically see work best for roll-up, senior debt, seller notes, earn-outs, minority rollover equity, etcetera?
Yeah, so everything you've just mentioned can come to play because it's absolutely dependent on. There's a lot of variables, right? So when we've got the group, buyer number one will have a different criteria and metric to buyer number two, and they'll negotiate differently. So, and each of the companies that we've got into a group, we don't spend any time harmonizing them and operationalizing them because that's going to take too long. So
Right,
what we're looking at is businesses that are profitable despite their potential chaos or their potential brilliant organization. So imagine a group of five that we've now got. One of them is really beautifully organized and the other one is not in terms of its efficiencies.
of course.
So buyer's going to say, you need to be in this business a lot longer because you're much more dependent. The business is much more dependent on you. And so so that's going to impact how that particular part of our puzzle gets paid out. Whereas another company in that group could be so well harmonized that sometimes they may not want to buy it because there's not much extra juice that they can squeeze out of reorganizing it because it's already been done very, very well.
Right,
So it's very difficult to say this strategy works. What does work is profitable businesses grouped together are worth so much more as a group than they are as individual companies. And because of that, our allegiance, our duty is to get owners more money. Now, there's no risk to them because they are not giving up any equity and they are not servicing any debt. And
right,
there's no disruption to their business. In fact, in many ways, it's a really nice play because when you're preparing a business for sale, people know.
right,
And when employees know that you're preparing to sell, they get nervy and they
right,
start looking around. So
right,
because we're adding value from the outside in a way that owners could do if they have the money but can't because they don't, then we're disrupting the business to a minimal level. So when we talk about risk, we say no equity dilution. So it's not minimal, there's no equity dilution. We don't take any equity.
right,
And when we say no debt, there's no debt they're taking on. So they get to keep so much more of it than they ever would have done selling as an individual business. And
right,
we'll get a much better value because we've now got them in a group. But we don't go in to try and operationally improve them. You could, if you've got all the CPA expertise, you could go in and do 2 years getting it already. More than half of the people that we talk to are possible buyers of a group that we're putting together don't want that done.
Right.
They want to do that themselves because if they could take a business on 15% EBITDA and take it to 30% EBITDA, just
Right.
to give you made up figures for this example, because they're going to improve it, then that's gain that they take and that gets their money back much more quickly. And acquisitions aren't the same for different companies either. We're doing an acquisition roll up for a very large tech play that everybody's heard of.
Okay.
And so in that scenario, what they're looking for is businesses with revenue of at least 20 million,
Of
at
course.
least,
Of
right? And so we're bringing that together because they find it very difficult to find the right companies. We're doing all of that because what we're dealing with is businesses that are not on the market. In fact, the bigger businesses, you think they might go to brokers and things like that. They won't. They'll only work through banks. They don't want to work through brokers. They won't touch a broker.
Right.
But but we can bring all that together and add value because we can even create the funding for said company to use if they need it. And
Wow.
where that sometimes happens is years ago, I was doing a software sale to a large information business. It was a 147 million sale.
Okay.
And at the last minute, at the 11th hour, the deal fell over because another deal came up that was even more attractive to them. They couldn't do both.
Sounds common. Sounds like something I just recently saw in a movie.
Right, so they did that deal, and they promised they'd come back and do the deal I was, preparing, and, I didn't believe them, but they did. They came back and spent 30 million more a year later because the business had performed the way that it said that it would, and so it was more valuable, and they paid it. But if I'd had the funding support that we've got now, I would have been able to offer that to them as operating capital, not capital, so they would have taken it on as a bridging loan, if you like,
Mm.
and done the acquisition. Now, they would have financed out of it within 2 quarters because they had to go to board approval to get the CapEx, and they would have done that, and they'd have financed out of it. And yeah, it would have cost them 2 or 3 million more, but the deal would have been off, and then they made their money back on the deal in 6 months because they had global distribution for this offering,
Mm.
so they could have pushed it earlier, and that extra 3 million wouldn't have been a problem.
Wow.
So every single deal is different and comes with its own set of things that you need to do for that
For sure.
particular buyer and
For
that
sure.
particular group. But we do work a lot with potential buyers before we even start the grouping process so that
Of
we're not
course.
holding the capital for a long period of time because we make
Now
the money on the turn,
So
on
now
the
I love what you're doing. It's phenomenal. It sounds like you are doing exactly what your son wanted you to do, helping those businesses actually get
right.
to go, on the golf course and go on all
Yeah.
the cruises. And so
Yeah.
let's talk about that post-acquisition. You talk about post-acquisition tax efficiency as well. What I know you don't wanna give away your secret, and I'm not gonna ask you to. What I
Yeah.
want to know is what are the biggest misconceptions founders have about tax-free? So tax-free is not the thing, right? Tell me a little bit about the biggest misconception that owners have.
It's not misconception more than you don't know what you don't know.
What needs to be true to be realistic?
Education. I think when I'm nearly every time when I'm talking to people, you got so if I try and put myself in the seat of a business owner, these guys have worked hard. They've taken on all the risk. They started a company. They funded it themselves. They bootstrapped it. Some of them are lucky enough to get more funding to come in to go to the next level. But they're all focused on building value, building an asset, building legacy, and they don't start to think about life beyond that until they start to think about maybe retiring or maybe they want to move on to the next. Just don't think about that. So if you come back to the double and keep it framework, there's a double it phase. That's the first leg of the stool.
Yes.
And then there's the keep it phase, which is what you're beginning to talk about now, but that comes in, in different guises. I'm going to put the tax piece you're talking about in there. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
Then there's the compounding stage. That's the 7-year piece. And then there's the repeat it phase. Now in the keep, it splits into two. There's operational improvements that help you get more on the EBITDA side because you'll get another two knots on the 2 points on the EBITDA of your operation well organized for those people that want it. But on the keep it side, it's not necessarily tax free, it's tax minimized.
Right.
So people are just not aware. So here's the problem that I see that doesn't help them get educated is most of these business owners trust their lawyers and accountants.
Right.
But accountants or CPAs are really very, very good at making sure that you're running the business tax efficiently in terms of paying the least amount of tax from one year to the next in capital gains or profit tax, and then minimizing the tax on your personal income. So there's all sorts of things. Now, when you're selling a business, the way that you run the books when you're selling a company is not the same as the way that you run the books when you're running a lifestyle business or running a business from year to year for most people. Most people. So it's education, and when you go to, I've had so many conversations with CPAs firms and accountants in the UK about how you can present things to minimize the tax, not eliminate it. And they just no, that can't be done. Now, with the power of AI, some of the things that we've done is written a tax engine that any business owner can use for any business they've got anywhere in the world.
My
And
goodness.
I will immediately tell them what their tax liability is likely to be personally and as a company for the piece of the company that they own. And I'll take that into a CPA and they'll just sometimes go, yeah, they'll dismiss it because they're not specialists in this. But we've been able to write this with code and AI. And I've recently, effectively, what we've done is bring the domain of the big four accounting firms, the PwCs
Yeah.
and the Ernst and Youngs, that only the richest companies can afford and do afford, and make it available to everybody. And
Oh,
we've done that with code and AI, right? So this software we run internally, we're just getting ready to go to market with it to make it available to everybody.
wonderful.
But we haven't done it yet. We still provide it to our clients so that they can see. But when we show them what can be done, it's like, oh my God,
Wow.
most of the time. And it's not some of the things that we suggest that they could do, they don't want to do. Right. So
Right.
if you want to exit your business, I'll give you a real case in point. So one of our clients, slightly different to a business, spent $100,000 with expert advice, structuring their personal affairs to pay less tax because they're coming into an inheritance of $200 million,
Right.
which is going to carry with it an $80 million tax liability and burden. They were ready to execute on this, and their advisor died.
Wow.
Came to us, just could you do anything with this? I didn't realize the back end of it. I ran it through the tools that we've built and went back and said, these are the options that you might have available for your personal circumstances that could reduce the tax A to zero,
Right.
or B to less than 8 million, or
Right.
C, somewhere over 20 million, and D, do nothing.
Right.
And so they went through that. Took us a couple of days to figure that out. They'd spent 11 months and 100 grand getting that advice. What we went back to them with was um, their response was, "Oh my God, in a couple of days, you've given us what we've just spent 100,000 on." And taken 11 months to get to. Actually, option A or B is where we need to go.
Mm.
Now they're executing on option A or B. Another client of ours on the West Coast is running a business that does 11 million in top line, 2 million in profit. And they own half, and then, between two people. And so they're thinking of getting ready to sell. So we were just looking at the double and keep it framework, and particularly on the keep it side of it, they don't want to tax mitigate to zero. They just want to tax mitigate as much as they can and not change their lives from where they are and everything else. So the potential savings for them on the sale price of their business are enormous. They took that to their lawyers and said, well, our accountant's going to charge us $1 million to do this. And I went, no, they're not. This is what it's going to be, and this is how it should be. And if that's what your accountant wants to charge, we'll introduce you to ours
Okay.
who can do this for you, right? And on the lawyer's side of it, they went into the lawyers and said, our accountants are going to charge $1 million. What are you going to charge? They said, probably the same. I went, no, they're not. This is going to be around 250,000. It would be a bit more, a bit less. And if they're not comfortable with that, then we'll introduce you to us. So what's happening in the service-based industries at the moment, where knowledge has been king in the past, is that AI has ripped it apart. Because
Absolutely.
now because now we can provide a counter that says, consider this, consider this. And you'll get a lot of challenge from the professional advisors. But what you're going to do is not reduce the fees, not eliminate the fees, but right size those fees.
That's correct.
So in that scenario, not only do we help them reduce the amount that they would leak if they sell the business, but we've helped them right size the amount they should pay so that they do keep more. And this is just on the keep size. We're not on the double side yet. So we got buyers in play for them. They're not ready to sell. We've got buyers in play for them. We've got that sorted out. Now it's a case of how much organic growth do they want to put in, or how much through the double and keep it framework can we bring and put in for them, because we bring capital to the table. When we were doing this for them 7, 8 months ago, I didn't have that freedom of capital that I've got now.
That's
And
amazing.
so going back to our family offices, we're now working on, and I don't know how you describe this, for the listeners, but we're now working on $1 billion fund that will have a wrap on it, which you know all about. So it's protection for the lender that we will be able to deploy on a 7 or 8% return for the lender, which family offices like because that's the kind of return they're looking for safely. So the fact that I can protect their money
Absolutely.
and secure them or secure their investment and give them a return on it means that it's going to take a little bit of time to get that sorted out because I've never raised one of those or put one of those together before. But you know what, Tanae, a year ago, people told us we could never raise or we could never do
I
this. We weren't
know.
good enough. And, look where we are now. And
It's
you've been
so
through these
amazing.
challenges yourself, right?
I have, and
And
something I've recently have been working with a lot of private credit lately to work, we're in the lower middle market of
yeah,
acquiring these businesses. I don't even know if it's middle market. It's just the small mom and pop businesses that we're rolling up and we're investing alongside, these companies. And so we're investing alongside these companies that are home services, healthcare, just all of these different companies. Their top line revenue is barely hitting $3 million. And I just
yeah,
found with a few of the private credit companies that we're looking for debt that they would rather see, and I've heard this now from three separate companies, which was really eye awakening, that they want a minimum of 5 million top line revenue. So very
yeah,
similar to what you've been doing. I just realized just Thursday, I
yeah,
went back to the operators that I'm helping to raise the capital, uh, say, hey, you know what? You need to kind of work all these acquisitions all at the same time so that we could put it together as a roll up. And then as a roll up, hold on just one second. Okay. So that we can put it together as a roll up and then as a roll up and just take down, say, four of these companies, five of these
yeah,
companies at the same time, because
yeah,
I have the money to do it for the debt. Unfortunately, it's not large enough. So there's
yeah.
one
But
company, yeah,
which
one
is, yeah, but it's why you group them. So if you're thinking of private equity, people say they're not going to look below a million. Typically, they're not really looking below three. And focus on the profit. The top line doesn't matter. The profit does. So
for these last two lenders, that was their thing. They said top line revenue because they are doing a term loan off top line. So
yeah, okay.
they're not even looking at EBITDA. So, but what was
They
interesting,
must be looking at service. They've got to be looking at debt service on that top line, though.
yeah, of course, to service the top line. However, that was their main thing, that they're not
Yeah,
even going to look at it unless it's
yeah.
5 million. So, I know we're coming down on the hour. So the businesses that you're working on, they're all 3 to 30 million, or is it higher? Is it 5 million to or
Um,
is it 100 million and over? Because I know the last time we spoke, you were mainly focused on businesses over 100.
oh, so it's different in as much as we won't work with a business that does less than 500,000 in profit. I'm not worried about the top line. Um, none of my investors are either. They're looking at profit.
Okay.
And so now I'm not selling to private equity. The challenge with private equity that I choose not to deal with at the moment is I won't reveal or go anywhere near potentially revealing our funding sources to private equity because I personally choose not to. And so if you think about what private equity does with a group that it's successfully rolled together over the last 5, 6, 7 years, who's it going to sell to? They're probably going to sell to a large corporate institution or another bigger PE. So we're going straight into corporate institutions a lot of the time, and we're working on and working with corporate institutions that are already multi-billion dollars. In fact, one of them spends over 5 billion a year on acquisitions. But what we're able to do is bring value and the quality that they can't get on their own, right? So
That sounds like
in those scenarios, we're bringing it up to the bank because the bank will organize the next stages in the process with the acquirer. And the due diligence they do is all over the place. Some of it is incredibly detailed. Some of it is not as detailed as you might think it would be. And anywhere between. So I'm really getting involved in markets where there is acquisitive activity taking place. So if you look at construction, home services in some areas we probably wouldn't look at, but in other areas we would. So if you look at people that are doing refurbishments, so when people can't buy houses because interest rates are too high, they fix up their own houses. So those niche companies that are got everything together and doing a really good job in a particular area, we'll look at that because there's always a buyer for them. We're kind of, in some ways, and this is a very dangerous thing to say, we are a little bit insulated from the highs and lows of the M&A market. And the reason I say that is because we know where our buyers are before we do the investments in the sellers, because I've got capital at risk if we don't know who our buyers are. And so if you look at somebody like Lowe's, who last year went out and spent over 1 billion on
Mm,
key manufacturing companies,
right.
they they didn't worry about the highs and lows of the market, because when the market's low, people are buying. It's just different people are buying. And when the market's high, people are still buying and selling, but it's just different people. And so what we're seeing a lot with private equity is that the family offices that have backed them haven't necessarily seen the returns that they wanted to have
Hmm.
all over the world. And that's not a PE issue, that's a market issue. So if I get into that, I got to know that if I've got 5 of these things and I own them, that I can sell them, because the only way I deliver on the promise of the double and keep for my owners is to be able to help them realize that. And that means them exiting with more in their pocket than they would have had if they weren't with it. So in
Wow.
that scenario, I'm kind of looking at it and going, who are my buyers before I've even done my seller piece? And if I've got no buyers, it doesn't mean I wouldn't do it. It just means I'm not going to do it now, because the market changes are going to affect the sectors that we can do the work in, because the process that we go through is the same. Doesn't matter what the market sector is, but we need buyers and sellers. And for that, we need to bring that's why we need to bring the cash, because if you don't have the cash, you can't complete. You can't
That
make that happen. And
that's
that's where, because we've been able to plug that gap and we're building a bigger reputation on just doing that, then the business hopefully will continue to flourish and grow. Although we're very selective. We don't do hundreds of deals a year.
that's
We're looking to be selective and do just a few deals a year, not when I say, somewhere between 10 and 30 companies or groups is what we'll do. We won't do more than that.
that's
Um, at the
amazing.
moment, at the moment. And so the next step after that will maybe, is there a way in which we could take that bigger? Because this is a challenge and an issue that we're solving that exists everywhere in the world.
It
And
does.
now we've got the capital to support it. We can do this in any non-sanctioned jurisdiction, because the capital sources that we got will
Interesting.
provide it for those jurisdictions.
So, I was recently in Africa, so there's a ton of business there. I'm looking to do some roll-ups there as well. I saw I'm researching sectors, but there were some very interesting sectors in a particular city that I saw a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of growth there. So maybe we can talk about that. You and I can talk forever at the top of the hour. So if you could give listeners one pre-exit checklist, what are the 5 things they should start doing 12 to 24 months before selling?
Just one thing: stay profitable, drive profit. Just one, drive profit. That's the only thing that I need. So when you're preparing a business for an exit and and you're saying, right, systems, processes, procedures, that may well be true depending on your buyer. But if you don't have a profitable business, you've got no chance.
Mm.
So now a profitable business could be owned independent and be unsellable, but I've got some mechanisms to potentially take care of that, depending. It just shapes the kind of way that we're going to invest in invest our capital into bringing companies together. So it's one thing: I need you to be making north of 500,000 in profit, and if not, go grab a copy of my book. And so, if people want to do that, there's a whole investment calculator that will show you what you could potentially be worth on our website. You just go in and put in your profit, put in your revenue, and put in your EBITDA margin, and that's all you need to do. And if you're under 500,000, it will challenge you to some free resources that will help you get to that 500,000. And then if you're over 500,000 and you want to look more at how the double and keep it framework can help you, it will show you at each different stage what you can achieve. But the key initial stage is, what am I going to come out with? How do we get the double and come out of it minimized in terms of what we're paying in fees? If you're in that category, do you want to, and then you can apply to join our wait list. And then when you apply to join our wait list, we'll have a conversation about your particular situation to see whether there's anything that we could do that would help you get from where you are to where you want to be, and double the value in 6 months, and then move the business forward to be sold. So we've taken all the work out for anybody that would like to work with us and put it into the back end of the website. But you need to be doing more than 500,000 in profit for us to be impactful in your business.
Wow.
And if you're not,
There's
then the
so
book
many there's so many mom and pops that are right there. Now, are you looking at SDE or EBITDA?
EBITDA.
Uh,
So $500,000 or pounds in EBITDA. But we don't need a proof of anything right now. It's just a case of what's your revenue, what's your percentage EBITDA margin, and then on the website, the whole wealth calculator, because that's really what it is. It's not just the selling of the business, but everything else is built out on that. You just answer those two questions, and we calculate everything else for you. Now, if you drop below the 500,000 in profit, in EBITDA, then it will say, we can't be as effective for you at the moment as we'd like to be. But if you'd like a free copy of my book that would help you maybe with one or two extra things that could get you there at low cost even quicker, go grab it here. It's free. You can download it as a PDF. And if you want a hard copy version of it, you can go and get it on Amazon. There's a link in there for that as well. But for those that are
We are gonna
then,
have all of that in the notes for the show. It'll all
yeah,
be right there in
just
the show
just
notes.
go just go to acquisitionsforyou.com and it will take you straight in it. And then you can apply to join the wait list, and then we'll have a conversation to see whether we can help. Because we're a business, we make money out of this, but we gear what we receive to what you receive. So we got to make sure that we're aligned and that we can deliver for you. Because if we can't deliver for you, we don't see a reward ourselves, and we want to help as many businesses as we can. So what we're hoping is people do this and then pay it forward, so that eventually the mission we're on is to change the way that every single company is bought, sold, valued in all over the world, so that owners keep so much more of what is theirs rather than leak it everywhere and end up not getting some owners get to a position where they become prisoners of their dream, and they should be flourishing because of their dream. They've taken all the risks, and so they should keep some more, we think.
So I'd like to close with what Thomas asked you for 5 years ago. He was 10 years old, and
Yeah.
now he's 15. What does he have to say about what dad is doing now?
Well, so just to remind listeners, what he said is I needed to help the 9 out of 10, because what would happen if their parents caught COVID and died? Who was going to look after their families? Fast forward, what he says now is, where are my royalties? Because he's in the book and I quote him all over the place. He is the mission. And so we've had lots of opportunity to do lots of different things, but we stay true to the mission, which is helping the 9 out of 10 that need it most.
Thank you
Um,
so much for your time.
Thank you for having
This
me.
has been phenomenal. I know we're gonna have to do a follow-up show in 3 to 6 months. Let's keep rocking, and we have so many nuggets in this show. It's just going to be, I mean, nuggets for people that are looking to invest their money in a family office, or even, maybe they can't invest in a family office, but a PE firm that buys businesses. And you have nuggets for businesses that are, part of the silver tsunami, that may just exit or just
This
retire and never even sell. So you have
Yeah, so it's
so
not
many.
just the silver tsunami. What I found, which wasn't what I was expecting, is that obviously the baby boomers retiring are a key area. But the two youngest people I work with are 19 and 24.
Really?
Yeah. And so what you find with a lot of the younger entrepreneurs is they understand brand. A lot of the older entrepreneurs understand P&L. And so what a lot of the younger guys are doing is trying to get to a point where they can take some money off the table and do multiple growth and exits. And today's digital economy, with all AI and everything else coming through, there's more opportunity for people the cost of getting into a business is less than it's ever been. And the opportunities to maximizing and profit from the sale of a business are much shorter, and the amounts that you can make are much bigger than it's ever been. In fact, even my own son, who's 19 years old and in the digital economy itself, is 19 and he's making $20,000 a month clear. Oh.
Wow.
Never, yeah, exactly. And so a lot of the messaging that we're gearing towards is helping, because I realize that I'm actually serving a
But
community
like
that's getting
father,
them to
like
go,
son. I mean, he's got an amazing mentor, so he wouldn't be
well, I don't know that he'd
wouldn't
agree
be
with
stuck
that, but
going
he's certainly got a mentor, but I don't know whether it's amazing. But you got younger
rubbing off
people,
on him without him even ever knowing it.
yeah, they're definitely entrepreneurial, but
He won't understand the extent that you have taught him and been a mentor to him until 30. He'd be
I
th
think some of it on the digital side of it's come around, and he's sort of looking at what I'm doing and going, do this, do this, do this, because because they just get it, and I've had to
Right.
relearn it and apply it. But what's happening with a lot of the younger people is they want to see a path, and AI is going to be a big thing of it. So you'll see a lot of content coming forward from me about how AI can help you move the bar.
Right.
It's not just what is AI, isn't this cool, but what's the use case?
How did
What are the use cases?
how
Yeah,
do
how do you use it? Will it help? So I'm going to be doing a lot more of that. I want everybody to be thinking about how they're growing their businesses right now so that they can exit with an awful lot more and exit with intent, because the double and keep it framework, which is those 5 pillars that I spoke about earlier, nobody thinks about, but everybody, in my opinion, humble that it is, should be, because what we're doing is thinking and acting in silos, and only when we're ready to jump to the next silo do we think about the next one, and then we leave too much on the table. But if you think about it from that point of view, and it starts with AI and how it drives businesses, you can get there faster with a lot more coming out of it, so you can come back and help a lot more people. I'd love to see a world where most entrepreneurs start at 20 and they've made all their money by the time they're 30, and then they're paying it back and paying it forward.
Wow, that would give us a lot of years to enjoy.
Yeah, it would.
Thank
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I hope this has been helpful.
Absolutely.